Out in the world, at this very moment, an animal is living its fullest possible life in total wildness and freedom, with no awareness of what lies ahead and no sense that within a few hundred years, or perhaps a few thousand years, a descendant of ours will look at it and decide that particular creature will live inside a house and eat from a bowl that carries its name. That is simply the pattern humans follow. We examine wild, dangerous, and unpredictable creatures and consider the possibility that they could become companions. This process took place with wolves. It took place with wild boars. It took place with the ancestor of the cow, which was known as the auroch, and aurochs were truly terrifying animals that stood 6 feet tall at the shoulder, with massive horns capable of destroying a person without any hesitation. Some ancient human observed one of them and considered it a source of milk. That person was a remarkable figure, but most people fail to realize that domestication has not come to an end. It did not stop. It is not an ancient process that finished 10,000 years ago, after which we have only maintained the results. No, right now, today, animals on this planet exist at various stages along the path toward domestication. Some of them are being actively bred while held in captivity. Some of them already live in close proximity to humans. Some of them simply display a level of friendliness that seems unusual for wild animals. The focus today is on which of these animals might actually succeed in the process. Which animals stand as the most likely to become the next dog, the next cow, or the next creature that people keep as a household companion. The discussion begins with a clear definition of what domestication actually means, because people confuse this concept all the time. Domestication is not the same as taming, and this distinction matters. A tame animal is a single individual that has learned to accept or even enjoy the presence of humans. Nearly any animal can be tamed if it is raised from birth with enough patience and enough injuries along the way. People have tamed tigers. People have tamed crocodiles. And there is a man in Russia who keeps a tame bear named Stepan that apparently enjoys watching television and hugging people. And Stepan is a tame bear. Stepan is not a domesticated bear. Domestication operates at the genetic level. It is a change that spreads through an entire population and is passed down across generations after being selected over time. Domesticated animals differ in fundamental biological ways from their wild relatives. They behave differently. They look different, usually with smaller heads, floppier ears, and shorter faces. They reproduce differently. They even process information differently. The classic demonstration comes from the fox experiment. In the 1950s, a Soviet scientist named Dmitri Belyaev began selectively breeding silver foxes. He chose only the individuals that showed the greatest friendliness toward humans, then bred those together, selected the friendliest of the offspring, and repeated the process. Within only a few generations, something unexpected occurred. The foxes did not merely become friendlier. They began to look different, with floppy ears, spotted coats, and curled tails. They started to bark. They started to seek out human attention. They looked and acted like dogs, even though no one had selected for any of those traits beyond friendliness alone. The physical changes arrived as a side effect because they connect to the same underlying biology. That experiment reveals something important. Domestication can occur more rapidly than previously assumed, and it shows what signs to watch for when trying to identify the next animal that might become domesticated. So, what criteria must an animal meet to qualify as a candidate? First, it must be able to breed successfully while held in captivity. This requirement seems obvious, yet it rules out a large number of species. Giant pandas struggled with captive breeding for decades. Cheetahs remain notoriously difficult to breed under human care. Some animals simply refuse to reproduce, unless every condition is precisely correct. Second, the animal needs a flexible diet. It is impossible to domesticate a koala. Koalas consume almost nothing except eucalyptus leaves, which contain mild toxins, and the animals have evolved a specialized digestive system to process them. The practical challenges alone would prove overwhelming. The goal is animals that will consume whatever food is provided, rather than animals that demand a very specific type of leaf imported from a single continent. Third, the animal needs a relatively calm temperament, or at least the genetic capacity for one. It does not have to be calm at the present moment. Aurochs were not calm. Wolves were not calm. Yet variation must exist within the population, so that some individuals react less strongly, show less aggression, and panic less easily. There must be traits available for selection. Fourth, and this factor receives less attention than it deserves, the animal needs social structures that align with human interaction. Herd animals, pack animals, and animals that naturally form hierarchies prove far easier to domesticate because they already possess the mental framework in which one individual holds authority and the others follow. A human can step into that leadership role, and the animal then feels at ease. Zebras fail this test in a dramatic fashion. People often ask why Africans never domesticated zebras in place of horses, and the answer is that zebras display genuine instability. They show almost no variation in their aggression levels. Every zebra remains prepared to fight at nearly all times. They bite and refuse to release their hold. There is a documented reason that zookeepers face a statistically higher chance of injury from zebras than from lions. Zebras effectively rejected the entire domestication process. With those standards established, the actual candidates come next. The animal that scientists currently regard as closest to full domestication is the fox, and this assessment rests only partly on the Russian experiment. The foxes produced by that project are now sold as pets. Beyond that, urban fox populations around the world are already undergoing evolutionary change. City foxes display measurably lower fear of humans than rural foxes. They act more boldly. They show greater curiosity. They read human signals more effectively. This shift is occurring naturally, without any intentional human selection, simply because the foxes that fear people less tend to thrive better in urban settings. With a few thousand years, and some deliberate breeding, the fox stands as the strongest candidate for complete domestication. It already behaves in ways that lean toward becoming a dog, but it has not reached that point yet. Next comes a candidate that may genuinely surprise people, the crow. Yes, it is a bird. Domesticated birds already exist, including chickens, ducks, geese, and pigeons, so the category is established. Crows differ because they possess extraordinary intelligence. Crows can identify individual, human faces, and they maintain long-term grudges. They have been observed leaving gifts such as shiny objects, buttons, and pieces of foil for people who feed them regularly. Documented cases show crows warning familiar people about nearby dangers. They instruct their offspring about which humans to trust and which ones to avoid, thereby transmitting social knowledge across generations. Urban crow populations are already forming a kind of informal partnership with humans. They learn garbage collection schedules. They have been seen using vehicles to crack nuts by dropping them into traffic lanes. They wait at crosswalks not near the signal button, but at the section of the crossing where the nuts avoid being crushed by wheels, yet still receive the correct impact from tires. Crows have analyzed human infrastructure and turned it into a tool. That level of behavior resembles a housemate more than ordinary animal activity. The difficulty with crows is that they do not form social groups in the same hierarchical manner as pack animals. They lack a natural leader role into which a human can easily fit. They do, however, create long-lasting partnerships. The open question is whether selective breeding across generations could yield crows that rely more heavily on social connections with humans. Based on the results already observed in the fox experiment, the answer is probably affirmative. A domesticated crow would prove both remarkable and somewhat unsettling, which fits the established character of crows. Attention now turns to something entirely different, the capybara. Anyone who has spent time online recently already knows that capybaras have become widely popular. They function as a meme, a cultural symbol, and an overall atmosphere of calm, oversized rodent energy. What proves interesting about capybaras, from a domestication perspective, is that they have already advanced part of the way. Capybaras rank as the largest rodents on the planet. They are highly social. They live in groups. They communicate constantly. They maintain complex social structures. They are already kept as pets in several countries. They remain relatively calm around humans when raised in their presence. They eat grass, which ranks among the most convenient diets available. They show a surprising ability to coexist with other species. There exists a large volume of video footage showing capybaras simply resting, while birds, monkeys, ducks, and other animals climb onto them as if they were living furniture. The primary obstacles preventing full domestication of capybaras are their need for water, since they are semi-aquatic and require regular access to pools or ponds, and the fact that they remain mostly wild animals with wild instincts. Yet the essential components are present. Calm temperament is present. Social hierarchy is present. A sufficiently flexible diet is largely present. Successful breeding in captivity is present. If a breeding program focused on selecting for affinity toward humans were started, it seems realistic that a recognizably domesticated capybara population could emerge within 100 generations. That span is not especially long on an evolutionary scale. They are also extremely large and resemble a guinea pig that has been greatly enlarged, so support for the idea remains strong. The next candidate is likely to create discomfort: the octopus. The discussion must continue despite the fact that octopuses are not cute or cuddly or warm-blooded. They live underwater. They possess 8 arms, 3 hearts, and blue blood, and they resemble aliens in many respects. Domestication, however, has never been limited to pets. The large majority of animals domesticated throughout history served as food sources rather than companions. Cows, pigs, chickens, and sheep fall into that category. Any emotional connection developed later, if it developed at all. Octopuses are already being farmed. Active octopus aquaculture programs operate in several countries, driven mainly by the fact that global demand for octopus as food significantly exceeds what wild catches can supply. Spanish research institutions have spent years working to close the life cycle of octopus farming, which means breeding them in captivity across multiple generations. What makes the situation interesting is that octopuses display individual personalities. Researchers who work with octopus tanks consistently report that separate animals react differently to different people. Some are shy. Some are aggressive. Some are curious and playful. They recognize individual humans. They have been observed spraying water at researchers they dislike. If selective breeding targeted animals that remain calm and curious around humans, that existing variation would provide material to work with. The challenges remain substantial. Octopuses have short lifespans, with most species living only 1 to 2 years. They are solitary and cannibalistic, which turns group housing into a major logistical problem. They are escape artists of legendary skill. Yet the core domestication criteria are largely met. Their diet is flexible, since they eat fish and crustaceans that can themselves be farmed. Breeding in captivity is becoming more successful. Variation in temperament is clearly present. The claim is not that great. Great-grandchildren will keep a pet octopus named Gerald. The claim is that the outcome is not impossible, and every domestication story in history began with something that was not impossible. The next subject returns to more familiar ground: the deer. Deer are fascinating from a domestication viewpoint, because humans have come very close historically. Reindeer, which belong to the same species as caribou, are semi-domesticated by several indigenous peoples of the Arctic and subarctic regions. They have been herded, selectively bred, and managed for thousands of years. They are not fully domesticated in the same manner as cattle, but they have advanced well along the spectrum. White-tailed deer, the ones that occupy suburban American yards and no longer show fear, are already adapting to human environments in ways that resemble early signals of domestication. They remain calmer around people than their ancestors were. They have learned to use human infrastructure. They associate humans with food sources. Red deer and fallow deer are farmed in many countries. Their meat is sold commercially. Breeding programs already exist. The supporting infrastructure is in place. Advantages for deer include their social nature as herd animals with clear hierarchy, their ability to eat grass and common vegetation, and their readiness to breed in captivity without major difficulty. Disadvantages include their status as seasonal breeders controlled by day length, which complicates year-round farming, and the presence of antlers, which are medically impressive yet also dangerous. If the question is which wild animal is most likely to become domesticated for agricultural purposes over the coming centuries, deer represent a serious candidate. The early stages are already underway, and the remaining question is simply how many additional generations of selection will be required. Then, there is the elephant. This case is complicated, because discussions of elephants and domestication quickly become complex. Elephants have been used by humans for thousands of years in warfare, in labor, and in ceremony. Nearly every working elephant throughout history, however, was a wild-caught animal that was then broken and tamed through an often harsh process that is taming, not domestication. Truly domesticated elephants that differ genetically from wild counterparts because of generations of selective captive breeding essentially do not yet exist. The potential remains large, and the debate continues. Elephants are extraordinarily intelligent, highly social, long-lived, and possess complex emotional lives. They can form deep bonds with individual humans. They communicate in sophisticated ways. They can learn large numbers of tasks and commands. The problems are significant. Elephants require 15 years to reach sexual maturity. Their gestation period lasts 22 months, the longest of any land animal. They need enormous amounts of space and food. A breeding program capable of meaningfully domesticating elephants would require centuries simply to pass through enough generations to produce measurable genetic change. Some researchers argue that the process is already beginning slowly in countries such as Myanmar and Thailand, where captive elephant populations have existed for generations. The elephants in those groups may already differ subtly from truly wild elephants in ways that are difficult to measure yet real. It would constitute the slowest domestication in human history, unfolding across a timeline measured in centuries, but it may already be underway. Stepping back for a moment reveals a larger question beneath all of these cases. Why does domestication continue to occur? Why do humans keep pursuing it? The obvious answers involve food, labor, and companionship. But something deeper is at work. Domestication represents, in one sense, the most profound relationship that can exist between species. It is not predation, because humans are not simply consuming the animal. It is not parasitism. Both species generally receive some form of benefit in a complicated exchange. It is a genuine long-term evolutionary partnership in which both species change because of the other. Dogs did not merely become domesticated. Humans also changed, partly because of dogs. People became more effective hunters. People became more skilled at reading nonverbal social signals from another species. Some researchers even propose that living with dogs helped humans develop theory of mind, the capacity to model what another being is thinking, which made human social intelligence so powerful. The Auroch did not simply become a cow. The humans who domesticated them constructed the agricultural foundation that made civilization possible. Cities, writing, and mathematics all rested on the support provided by domesticated animals. Therefore, when the question is asked about which animal humans will domesticate next, the inquiry is not only about the animal. It is also about who humans will become as a result of that relationship. That is a genuinely difficult question to answer, because every new domestication alters the human side as well. If crows become domesticated household companions, what effect will that have on the human relationship with urban nature? If foxes become fully domesticated, will that blur the distinction between dog and fox in ways that alter how both are perceived? If octopus farming becomes established, will the intimacy of the process, including recognition of individual animals, observation of their personalities, and selection of which ones live and reproduce, create new ethical obligations that do not currently exist? The domestication of animals has never been a purely practical undertaking. It has always been intertwined with culture, with identity, with ethics, and with meaning. The next wave of domestication will follow the same pattern, except that it will occur with greater knowledge, more advanced technology, and more public scrutiny than ever before. One additional candidate receives almost no attention, And it serves as a fitting conclusion because it may be the most interesting: the wolf. This does not refer to dogs, but to wolves once again. A small yet serious scientific discussion is underway about whether wolves in certain isolated populations, especially in regions where they have lived in close contact with humans for extended periods, are experiencing a second independent domestication event separate from the one that produced dogs tens of thousands of years ago. This does not apply to all wolves or even most wolves, but to specific populations in specific locations that have coexisted with human settlements across generations. The idea is that in places where wolves have learned to live alongside humans rather than flee or fight, and where those wolves are more likely to survive and reproduce, selection pressure is already operating. Passive selection is already favoring wolves that react less strongly to humans, show more curiosity, and are more willing to accept food near settlements. This pattern should sound familiar, because it is probably exactly how the original domestication occurred. It was not a deliberate decision or a formal breeding program, but simply wolves lingering at the edges of human camps with the bolder, calmer individuals succeeding generation after generation, until one day a human looked at one of them, decided that particular animal could come inside. Humans may be standing at that same edge again right now, with a different wolf population in a different century, for a different version of the same story. If that assessment is accurate, and if domestication is not merely something humans accomplished once long ago, but something that continues to emerge as a kind of force that draws certain species and human societies toward one another, then the question of which animal humans will domesticate next may have a simpler answer than expected. All of them eventually. All the ones that are capable. All the ones that are prepared. Because somewhere out there at this moment, an animal is standing at the edge of a human settlement, looking inward and choosing not